9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, welcome. It's Sunday the 21st of May at 8 p.m. You're here for the Late Late Show on Teachers Talk Radio. I'm Wendy Frost, and tonight we will be talking about diversity and representation in the drama space and looking at the global majority voices. And we have some special guests tonight, Theo Chambers and Zena Rashid.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on your Sunday evening when teachers are getting ready for school the next morning. So this evening, I have got some great guests that are going to be joining us and talking about the drama classroom and their experiences. I've got Theo Chambers and Zena Rashid, who are going to be joining us and sharing some of their experiences as teachers, as drama teachers in schools. So before we do that, actually, before we jump into that, I like to kind of set the scene a little bit. Maybe it's the drama teacher in me. Set the scene of education at the moment and what it looks like for us all. And so I found some statistics and data. And for a drama teacher, I know some of you might be a bit surprised by that, but we do like to use statistics and data to inform our teaching, everything that we do in the room. So some of the data that I was looking at, I wanted to have a look at what diversity really means in schools. What does that look like? What does representation look like? And the figures were not easy to find. But actually, when I did find them, I found them on the government website. And these figures come from the census in November 2021. So they're actually still quite recent. And of these figures that I found, this data, it covers school teachers in state-funded schools in England and breaks down ethnicity. Not included in the data, actually, are people like teaching assistants, teachers on contracts of less than a month, so maybe supply would count in that too, I imagine. Independent schools, sixth form colleges and further education schools and colleges. So actually, I think we're pretty much talking about primary and secondary state schools in England. Only 91% of respondents to this gave an answer for ethnicity. And I'll start with the headlines of this. So the headlines, it tells us that the school workforce, the ethnic diversity apparently is increasing across schools, but the teaching workforce still continues to be predominantly female. Some interesting stuff for us as drama teachers, actually. In 3 of 5 teaching hours that are taught, 3 in 5 of those teaching hours are spent teaching English, the EBAC subjects, of maths, English, science, including computer science, actually, history, geography, and modern languages. So 3 in 5 every teaching hours are being given over to the English Baccalaureate. A really interesting fact, actually, and I couldn't get more on this, is that it says that entrance to teaching, so teachers that are joining us, new teachers, are going up from last year, but it's actually down from pre-pandemic levels. So actually, I think a lot of us as teachers might be quite surprised by that, to see that this data is telling us that there are more people coming into the profession than leaving. So I might want to question that a little bit as someone who's in and out of schools quite a lot. So some other summary data, as we're looking at ethnicity, this data talks about, it says in 2021, 85.1% of all teachers in state-funded schools in England were white British. That's I knew it was going to be quite high, but actually that was a little bit higher than even I thought it was. So 85.1% teachers are white British. It says people from white other ethnic groups make up 3.8% of teachers and 8% of the working age population, so less those teachers are coming into teaching. People from the Indian ethnic group make up 2% of teachers, and white Irish people make up 1.4% of teachers. So the figures are actually pretty low. So breaking that down a little bit more, if I haven't lost you yet with the maths, but it's quite interesting to talk about this when we look at numbers. Of 466,145 teachers who responded to this census, 9,508 were Indian, so 2%. 1.3% were Pakistani. 1% were identifying as Black African. 1.1% as Black Caribbean. And 0.1% were mixed white and Black African. Then we also have mixed white and Black Caribbean as 0.4%. And the Chinese group make up 0.2%. So the figures are incredibly low out of the 466,145 teachers. Just a couple more, and I promise I'll stop throwing statistics at you, but these will be really interesting for our guests to talk about, because I know that we wanted to talk about promotion and what it's like for teachers. So of people that said they were head teachers, there were 20,786 head teachers. 92.5% of that statistic belong to the white British group. So 92.5% of head teachers are white British. Let's break that down a bit more. So we're talking about senior leadership. White British people make up 92.5%, like I said, of head teachers. Then we have 90.8% of deputy head teachers, 87.8% of assistant head teachers. So in terms of senior leadership, we're seeing this huge dominance of white British people. And it says then people from Chinese and mixed white and Black African ethnic groups make up 0.2% of classroom teachers and around 0.1% of deputy and assistant head teachers. And this is the lowest percentages out of all of the ethnic groups identified in this census, which is, a really low number. And just thinking about the head teachers, and then I promise, bring in our very patient guests. In 2021, there were around 20,800 head teachers, like I've said. Over 2/3 of those were women. I'm not sure that would be too much of a surprise. Of the 95.7% of female head teachers counted, they were white. 1.6% of those were white Irish, and 1.7% of those were white other. And of the male head teachers, 96.5% of those male head teachers were white. And 1.9% were white Irish, and 1.9% were also white other. So I think in terms of when we're looking at representation and teachers in schools, and leadership positions in schools, you can see that schools are dominated in England by white British teachers across the spectrum. So it's important for us to talk about what that might mean, what that looks like in the classroom, and what that means to our kind of young people around us as well. So that's probably enough from me. I've thrown a lot at you to think about in terms of numbers. I hope you've retained some of those. If not, we might revisit them as we are talking. And I think I'm just waiting for Zena to find her way into the room. But for the moment, I shall welcome in Theo and say hello to Theo Chambers, who's waiting patiently in the background. Hello, Theo.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. I'm glad we can all hear you.
Good, good.
And thank
Yeah,
you for joining.
really happy to be here. Really excited.
Great. That's brilliant. So I threw a lot of stuff at you just then. I expect you to have digested much of that. So why don't we start with you just telling us a little bit about yourself, Theo, and your role in your school. What do you do? What's your current teaching role?
Sure. So I have a background of drama and theatre, and I've been teaching drama in secondary schools for 6 years. September will mark my 7th year. Currently, I'm based in London, in the borough of Lambeth, where I'm a head of year alongside a subject lead of drama. So I'm sort of juggling those two roles, which comes with its joys and comes with its struggles, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying it. Really enjoying it.
Great. So you've got a couple of roles then, haven't you? You're not just a drama. You've got other things going on as well for you.
Yeah, the pastoral side for me, I think, is where my passion lies. I guess alongside teaching drama, I think about the members of staff that I remember when I was in school. They tend to be pastoral staff who helped to shape who I was, and gave me opportunity and helped to grow who I then became. So that's a passion for me.
So did you say 7 years you've been teaching now?
Yeah, this is the end of the 6th year. September will mark the 7th.
Wow. And how's that gone? Because you've then been teaching through a pandemic, and the massive changes that's been going on, like generally in education. So that's 6 years of kind of a rocky settling into your career, isn't it?
Yeah, it really has been quite rocky. The pandemic was quite surreal. Who would have envisioned teaching online and a practical subject like drama and trying to keep up, our young people enthused and engaged through virtual means was tough, and it really tested everything that I know about teaching, and it was about sort of like inventing the wheel almost, and that was such an experience. But what coming out of that experience, what I learned is that drama is just so valuable to our young people, and it goes far beyond getting in the space and playing some games. It's really about building connections. It's about testing ourselves, pushing the boundaries, thinking outside the box, and seeing the young people engage with that even online was quite surreal as well.
Yeah. So you would have had a few years of teaching. I'm going to say normally, I'm doing air quotes. You obviously can't see that, but teaching, in a kind of normal situation. And then just as you've really kind of found your feet and confident with that, suddenly the world is just upside down.
Yeah, I had a couple of years and I was teaching in a Lewisham school, and that was good fun. And almost overnight, we're all at home locked up. So yeah, if you like, this is the latter end of working through that and exploring that, and very much happy to be in the classroom again. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think as drama teachers, we are, aren't we? Really, we like being around young people, being in the same room as them.
Absolutely, and it's just one of those opportunities to really kind of watch young people grow. I mean, I look at maybe a young person that I might take on a GCSE in year 10 and watching maybe how timid or anxious or shy they are. And by the end of the course, at the end of year 11, often there's huge marginal gains on just those things that I mentioned, like confidence. And that's always exciting.
Yeah, and I think we might just be getting Zena into the room. Just give me a moment. Sometimes this takes a little bit longer. Hello, Zena. Are you there with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, that's amazing. That was very exciting.
I think it's technical stuff, isn't it? We're not. Well, I don't know about you. You might be amazing at technical stuff, but me.
Absolutely, all the time.
Thank you for joining us. Thea's been keeping us all entertained and warm while we just waited for you to get into the room.
Oh, hello, Theo.
Hello, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. I can see why you didn't recognise me. My name is quite just a collection of consonants.
Of letters, yes, exactly.
Sorry about that. I don't know how that happened.
It's technical stuff, don't worry. So now you have joined us. Theo's told us a little bit about himself and his current role and what he does. Why don't you do that with us so we can get to know you a little bit too?
Okay, so stop me if I yatter on too long. So I've been teaching for about 20 odd years. I didn't go into it in a sort of directional and purposeful way. I kind of happened. I went to teach in Sri Lanka after I graduated with a TEFL and a sort of still wet off the printer graduation, and ended up teaching in an international school. And really liked it, actually. Surprised myself. Taught Sen, taught English, taught TEFL, and then taught some drama. And then I applied to Homerton and did my teacher qualification. And then in that time since then, I've taught in Peterborough, in a school in North Sheffield, and I'm currently in a school near Barnsley. And I've done all sorts of things. I worked full-time until quite recently, and I was head of drama, head of faculty, second in faculty, did pastoral roles, was associate assistant head, but currently I'm just a drama teacher, 3.5 days a week, and I'm at college, and I do some stuff for Lung Theatre and for National Drama, which is how I know you. So yeah, that's me.
Yes. My gosh, you have probably been around all over the world in
I'm
different
quite
places.
quite old.
I wasn't going to say that, Zena. I definitely wasn't going to say that. But you can say that if you want to. But yeah, wow. I didn't realise you'd been teaching in different places like that.
Yes.
That's amazing. What did that bring to you, teaching, overseas and stuff? How does that made a difference to you?
I mean, I was young and teaching in an international school. I mean, at least then it was kind of in the 1990s. It was joyous. It was fantastic. The kids were another level. They were diplomats' children, and I taught in one sort of, they called it a local international school, which meant it was English medium. Kids there, and it was a primary school actually, so all the kids called me auntie, and I didn't know who they were talking to for about 2 days. I kept looking around expecting relatives to be behind me, but they were talking to me. It was brilliant. Yeah, I taught kids from all over the world, but they were all very, they were sort of politicians and prime ministers and CEOs' children. We went to the beach every weekend. It was marvellous. Yeah.
Wow.
It was a bit of a shock coming back to teaching.
I was going to
doing my teacher training in Braintree.
I was going to say it's slightly different now then for
Just
you.
a little bit. I mean, not that much different, obviously.
Beach all weekend.
Oh my word. We didn't know we were born.
Being young and teaching.
Absolutely.
Let's not scare off Theo. He's only been teaching for 7 years, so we don't want to, scare him off from what we're doing. So let's talk a little bit about yourselves, share as much as you want to or as little as you want to, both of you. A little bit about your background. It might be your family, where you're from, where your family's from, influences, any of that, if that's okay. Theo, do you want to give us a little bit, if you don't mind?
I think mine is probably a little bit less interesting than Zena's. Born and bred Londoner. Born in Southwark, St Thomas's Hospital. Went to school, was very much interested in drama and engaged in a lot of outside extracurricular type drama things. Went on to university, and initially I left sixth form with the intention to study film and TV. So I did that, and that was really good fun, and I really, really enjoyed it. But somewhere in between second and third year, I had a little bit of an epiphany, and I felt like I was almost parting from drama in a way that I didn't want to.
Mm.
So I decided to explore the world of teaching and work out if that was for me. So I did a year of cover supervisor in the trenches.
Right.
And that was fairly interesting. And I kind of made a decision from there, almost my first, second day in the school, actually. This is where I think I need to be. When we go and talk about legacy and what we want to achieve and what we want to leave behind, that was the moment for me where I felt, actually, yeah, this is where I need to be. And drama was my mechanism to do that.
Did you have any family members that became teachers? Were you like the first? How was it for your family?
No, my dad was a financial advisor. My mom was a business consultant. So no, nothing of the type. I'm bucking the trend, as they say.
Right. So you were the first one to start waving the flag for teachers then.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the influences in my life, I've got a family friend who is very well known in the UK drama world, I think, in the TV world. His name is Ashley Walters, and he did a lot for me in terms of, I shadowed him, went on film shoots and TV shoots, and I learned a lot about the industry from that end, and I was able to work out what I wanted from drama, from the industry, and teaching was my go-to.
Wow. Well, that's a lot more interesting than you gave us to expect. You're hanging out on film sets. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, it was quite surreal. I soon learned that I'm not sure that the film set life is for me, but
Yeah.
I think two of my passions obviously is drama, and the other is young people development. So my role currently now, doing the pastoral, doing drama and helping young people who are interested in drama to grow their skill set, I think is perfectly placed for all the things I want to accomplish in the world of teaching.
Great, thank you. Zena, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background, family, influences, that kind of thing?
Yeah, of course. Theo, that sounds amazing. Yeah, amazing. You sound like you had goals. You're quite clear-headed. I think I was, I sort of fell into things, I think, and then realised I liked them afterwards. Yeah, I don't think I had that sense of purpose. Some people when they're 14, they know where they're going. I didn't. I just knew I really loved drama at school. So my family were very doctor, lawyer, engineer. Although neither of my parents were either of those. My mum was a midwife and a surgery nurse, and my dad did sort of different sort of financial and admin jobs. He always worked. And my school was unusual in that it offered drama, and I absolutely loved it. So I don't think I'd have had the opportunity to know what it was at all if not for my secondary school, which was it was a little bit liberal, it was a little bit artistic. It had the head teacher was a musician. So it had a different approach to all the other schools in the area. And I loved, and I went to see all the plays that I could. It was in Hemel Hempstead, so not the cultural epicentre of the universe, but they had an excellent local theatre, and I just saw everything I could and end up getting a job there. Yeah, and I made a complete pig's ear of my A-levels, and so me and my friend, so I couldn't get into drama college on that, which is what I wanted to do, and my parents were very ambivalent about it. They were like, what on earth are you thinking? You could do something useful, and you've got a brain while you're doing drama. And what upsets me, I think one of the things that upsets me is that the things I used to hear in the 1980s still are sort of there in the, just underneath, or just like not even underneath the surface. They're sort of in our cultural landscape, loud and clear. And I think, how has that happened? How have we not made progress there? How are we still thinking so wrongly and so ignorantly about such a brilliant subject that's full of opportunities for all children, whether they whatever they're sort of wherever they are on entry. It's just that everyone should have access and entitlement and a right, like they should have a right to maths and chemistry, and music and everything else. So me and my friend set up a theatre company, and we did day jobs, and we were on the Starship Enterprise Allowance Scheme. That's how long ago it was. And we went all over the country doing open spots and little shows, and that got me. And I ran like a youth theatre company, and we were in a women's group. We wrote our own shows with this group of amazing women that just kind of amateur, and that got me into Bretton Hall. So that was my and then so it wasn't this sort of focused straight arrow of a route at all.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit like mine. I took some time out and did a few different things, worked in a chocolate shop.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't. I ate so much chocolate. Ridiculous. But I did a bunch of strange things. I kept my hand in theatre, but I wasn't it wasn't my goal to start with. And then when it was, that was it. There was no stopping me. But I kind of floated around a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can take a while to get there. And I think, like you're saying, that sometimes the encouragement of that, it just isn't there.
Well, it was very different, even at school, although they offered drama, it was still a bit of an outlier. And the kids who did drama, we were still sort of a little bit sidelined. We were the eccentric kids. We weren't, we were a little bit creative. We were a little bit eccentric. We possibly wore strange makeup. And we had and they gave us that space, I suppose, to tell stories, to perform, and we were confident there. But then doing it outside of that space, that was another thing. I don't think I knew you could do a drama degree until I was about 16. I didn't know there was such a thing. And then I got a book out the library about different degrees you could do, and it blew my mind. So I think I was quite, small town girl.
Yeah, sometimes
I knew you could be a doctor, and I knew you could be a lawyer and a nurse, and Mum and said teaching was good for women because you'd be home by 3 o'clock for the children, which put me right off.
That's off the seller, isn't it? You'll get
I'm
home.
not doing that. That sounds terrible.
I was like, but also, I don't ever know a teacher that's ever left school at 3 o'clock.
Well,
so that was just a lie. So from the beginning, they were lying, I think. Theo, do you want to tell us a little bit about when you were taking drama at school? Did you take drama at school yourself? How did that work?
Yeah, I like Zena. I went to a school who that offered drama, and that was great for me. I was probably naturally not as academic as I should have been. So music, drama, dance were all GCSEs that I took and thoroughly enjoyed. I can't rave that I'm an excellent dancer now, but I try my best. And drama for me was just a really exciting realm to be creative. That alongside music, so I play a few instruments: keys, bass, guitar, and both of those in tandem for me. I was just in my element. Studying GCSE went really well for me. I think I enjoyed it. I think I'm naturally shy person. I think about primary school, I'm probably naturally shy. But GCSE really, for me, was one of those moments where I found my voice. I grew in a little bit more confidence. My friendship group probably grew a little bit, off the back of that, and that was handy for me. Went on to study that at A level and superseded my expectations and did very well. Drama A levels, one of the few grades where I can say I've got an A star in. A's for me were never a thing. I kind of always struggled academically. So, I quickly found that, yes, this is my bag. This is something I can do very well at, and it's actually something I enjoy. So that's my story.
It's really interesting, though, when we say academic quite a lot about subjects. I know that's kind of like legacy subjects, but the GCSEs and the A levels that we teach now in drama are absolutely academic in every way. It's, we look at them now and we can talk about percentages of written work as opposed to the practical work. And, it's practically, they're all practically theatre studies, GCSEs and A-levels now, aren't they? You can see that on lots of teacher chat groups, that it's not anything like probably, the two of you and myself took when we did school ourselves. It's a whole new world.
Absolutely. And I kind of reference it, drama, as a pracademic subject. So yes, there are practical elements to it, but especially in the GCSE course and the A-level course, there's huge amount of theory work. 70% in the course that we run at the school I work at, it is tough. And quite often, in schools where senior leadership are allocating who studies what subject, drama is one of those subjects that often might get students who didn't know what to pick or weren't very interested in anything else, and they are in for a culture shock when they realize that 70% of the GCSE is based on their ability to theorize things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we have to have those conversations with students. But I'm definitely, you said pracademic, and I've not heard that before, and I love it. Pracademic. Yeah, you're absolutely, it is. But it is that practical, but written. It almost is right, but it's almost like academic needs to go first because that's where all of the time is spent, isn't it? But absolutely, that I think you just made a new word, Theo.
I must confess, I did get that word from Maureen Ferry.
I think you should have took it, and we'd have all gone with that. That you made that academic.
But it's so interesting in the same fashion that practical is always marrying up with a theory and vice versa, and they're so interlinked. You can't take one without the other. Yeah,
no, you can't. And as whole human beings, to separate our practical bodies from our cognitive processes is ridiculous to try and do that, because we're, as drama teachers, we know, don't we? We're whole-bodied humans, and our brains and our bodies work together. And if you try and separate one from the other, it kind of quite quickly starts to fall apart, I think. And we can see that in our drama spaces, can't we?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Anything to say about that, Zena, in terms of the
I just think that we love, as a society, we love pigeonholes, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And we've never quite, this is, I suppose, over the last 100, 200 years, there's always been a tension around what education is for. And, for me, that's kind of an issue for drama, because obviously I wrote an article about this ages ago, but it is academic. It's one of, I think it's got all the analysis and content and canon and connection making and description and evaluation of history and English literature. It's got, if you're doing a verbatim or a research-based devised piece, you need to have a real deep understanding of a political issue, of the data, of the stats, of how the data can lie, of opinion, of interpretation. But you've also got to have the physical and technical skills of what I suppose the old guard would wrongly, in my view, call practical. And by practical, there's some sort of hidden meaning in that, meaning you just have to do it, not think about it. But actually, that is not true. And I don't think it's true in PE or music or either, actually. It's almost like somebody undermined the ability to make a choice about what kind of mark you make on a page. That's an academic, thoughtful, decision with a purpose. But not only do you need to do that, you also need to do it. So you do have to work as a team in team sports, but at least they follow the same rules every game. But in drama, you have to do all that with a group of people. So you have to have pretty high level collaboration, decision making, problem solving skills of, listening and being articulate and saying what you mean and trusting where you don't know, which I think grown-ups find very difficult, never mind children. That process of being able to hold the unknowable
Yeah.
You know, the uncertainty of where the devising or the interpretation is going, to hold that uncertainty and make progress. So, you know, for me, drama is one of those subjects where you really have an opportunity to practice an enormous amount of skills that are physical, emotional, academic, visceral, you know, intellectual and collaborative in a really quite meaningful way when you're just 15 or
Yeah.
12 even, you know, if you're lucky enough to have it at Key Stage 3.
Yeah.
So I do think we've had some bad press from strategic leaders who didn't really know what they were talking about, possibly in the nicest possible way, and didn't sort of find out. You know, maybe they were basing it on what they did at school or a play that they'd seen or when they did drama at the school show. Do you know what I mean? People have extrapolated in that way that we're all experts in education if we've been to school, but that isn't actually quite right. Do
Well,
you know
that's
what I
like
mean?
saying
You're all
I had.
experts in drama if you've been in a Year 6 show or you've watched the telly.
Yeah, exactly. It's like saying, well, I watched an episode of, you know, Casualty on TV, so now I can do an operation, isn't it? It's like
I mean, imagine.
that's not really how it works, is it? In every sense, to be honest. So, yeah, it's a tricky time, but I think as drama teachers, we've experienced that for quite a long time, haven't you? This doesn't feel new. It feels different, but it doesn't feel new. And the struggles that we're going through, you know, post-pandemic, as we started talking about with Theo at the beginning, just in terms of general teaching, you know, numbers and students trying to get back into drama and think about all those key skills that they need to be in our rooms, has taken a real hit, not just because of cuts, because of the pandemic. It's we've suffered massively the last few years, really, and it feels like a different struggle to the ones that we've known for a while, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think it's 36% from drop since 2010.
Yeah,
you know, so we were omitted from the national curriculum in the 80s. Then there was this sort of time where creativity mattered and children, you know, every child mattered and arts and creativity in the curriculum. And then but we still weren't a foundation subject.
No.
But then I think the EBAC and the, you know, Darren Henley wrote a brilliant report in 2012, which was completely shelved. So, I mean, this is interesting because Jeff Redman, who's the chair of National Drama, I mean, it was brilliant. He was invited to speak at the 11 to 16 curriculum committee, you know, and he sort of talked about he talked about why is it still marginalised and undermined in the hierarchy of subjects, and that was actually in Drama and Theatre magazine or something. So, you know, so this is it's kind of that it's what we do about it, I suppose.
Yeah,
it's what we do about it now with that passion and that belief that education transforms lives on any level. That education that is actually genuinely broad and balanced and includes drama is better than education without. I believe, you know, I really believe that.
Absolutely, and I think it feels like there's another set of changes coming. I'm not quite sure what they are, and I don't think anybody really knows what they are. But the tide is turning generally for education, I think, in lots of ways, and I'm kind of constantly fingers crossed that some of that starts swinging back to thinking about the arts and the role that plays holistically in young people's development and the enjoyment of education as well, I think, which is massively underestimated for young people. Let's think a little bit now about representation in schools and what that looks like, what that might be like, and what that's like maybe around, you know, the two of you in your schools and who you see around you in terms of global majority representation. And are there school leaders around you who might be role models for you as teachers in school and the students in their rooms? And Theo, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting for me as well. I work in a Lambeth school, and in the school that I work at, we have a huge amount of Black African slash Black Caribbean students, something like 85%. So huge amount,
Wow.
and the representation of maybe Black and Caribbean staff in the school, you know, is nothing similar to that. And that goes back to the stats that you mentioned at the beginning of the show, really.
Yeah.
You know, the whole idea that, um, global majority teachers are heavily and massively underrepresented in our schools. So I guess that makes sense alongside the stats. Um, I think moving forward, and alongside, the data that you kind of presented previously, we are seeing growth and gains, and that's always great. And I hope that, part of me deciding to kind of become a teacher and work in the types of schools that I have was to kind of show, the young people that I teach that, obviously there are many careers you can go in, and obviously you can go in whatever fashion, your interests take you. But this is what being a young male Black drama teacher, and I don't know that I've seen one before in my time, looks like, And if that's something that you want to do, then absolutely you can do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I suppose, and it's really important to have those role models, isn't it? It's when you said, what, 85% of Black African and Black Afro-Caribbean as well? Is that kind of the breakdown, do you think, Theo? And around them, all that they have is maybe you to come into their classrooms, and that's not really going to encourage them to want to become teachers generally, is it? It doesn't really seem like a pathway that is open to them.
Absolutely, and I think there's so many things to consider and so many forces at play here. I think Zena mentioned earlier on in the show that she was very much encouraged by mom and dad to consider, a particular type of job, maybe a doctor or an engineer or similar.
Yeah.
And I think for me, in my upbringing, that wasn't the case, or at least not from my mum anyway. My mum was very much happy for me to engage in whatever made me happy, as long as I was enjoying it, and I was making gains and I was happy within myself. My dad was probably a little bit more studious and wanted me to be some sort of lawyer or similar. And that could possibly be the story of our young people, whereby their parents might be encouraging them to explore particular types of careers. And I can imagine the impact that might have on the decisions they make or their interests or even what they're exposed to,
Yeah. I think it's also, gosh, we're in a cost of living crisis apparently. So I think part of that as well is that the arts and drama are not seen as viable careers to make money, or not to make a lot of money anyway. So alongside that must be what parents are also having, in terms of discussions with their children about being able to pay the rent and eat, and and those things affecting their life choices.
Yeah, I think that's maybe where. Sorry, is it all right if I butt in?
Yeah, no, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something there about our leaders and how, are we representing the. So Nicola Heitner's just written this really interesting sort of article where he talks about, what the Arts Council is for, and community arts, and taking money out of London and in the regions, and but what is kind of, if we see the arts as elitist and only for children who go to a certain kind of school, come from a certain kind of background, we are doing a massive disservice to all the children that come through all our schools. Because, for me, and I had a million more opportunities than my mum and dad, easily. But even then, I only would have found drama through my school, through my secondary school. If it wasn't there, I wouldn't have found it. It wasn't available to me. It needed a teacher to say, I'm taking a school trip. And my mum went, well, if there's a teacher going, of course you can go. You know, so there's something about how are we, you know, are we showing children that they are makers, they are storytellers. They're not just consumers, that they are critics and judges and cultural commentators. They're in it, they make it. You know, we don't live in a fixed world. We live in a massively plural, changing world, and they've got to navigate all that. And, you know, a great education in which they have access to the arts
This
is really
programme has been brought to
important.
you by the Happy Confident Company.
Sorry, that was a technical thing. More
That's all right. So he sort of talks about the creativity of each of us, which the Arts Council really wants to champion, like, so everyone has access. But it's difficult when the arts have been stripped. He says the creativity must be nurtured without the help of schools from which the arts have been ruthlessly stripped. You know, so that's Nicholas Heitner, who, you know, has a national view. He's got a huge platform. So there is something about, in order to, you know, it's not going to make every child a writer and a composer, but in order just to make a functioning society, we have to give our children access to these opportunities.
Yeah.
So that we can represent ourselves and live our lives and, you know, manage all of that. And having a great drama education helps.
Yeah,
I
my
think.
gosh, yeah. Totally, it does.
Do you mind if I just tag on to
Wow.
that as well?
Yeah, of course.
Please do.
Yeah, I was listening to Zina's speech just there, and you mentioned the word access, and I think for me that encompasses everything that drama is. It's access. It's access to, you know, confidence. It's access to storytelling. It's access to being creative. It's access to having empathy. You know, all these really important life skills that
So
one
important,
needs
Theo. Yeah.
to be successful. You know, that is drama, and it's quite heartbreaking, really, when we have these discussions from maybe politicians or school leaders who don't really have an idea about how instrumental our subject is in building up the individual, building up the person, ensuring that they're successful. So for me, you know, all the time and every moment and every second that I can, I'm championing that, you know, the idea that drama is the center of everything we grow our lives upon.
Yeah, and that's a really lovely way to put it as well. That, you know, I think for a lot of us, drama is the centre, and if we think back, that's much of the reason why. Well, it's the reason why we're here talking right now. But I'm sure we could all pick lots and lots of students and people that we know that have had their lives changed because of their relationship with drama, but not just going into the world as actors and writers and directors and producers and stuff, but just having a much richer life and a lifelong love of the arts and engaging with culture, I think, in a different way.
Yes,
And that doesn't happen,
you know,
does it? If you don't have that kind of exposed to you as a child in school, it doesn't happen naturally unless you maybe have that cultural capital, isn't it? And maybe some of those schools that you were sort of indicating, Zina, that, you know, those schools that do value drama and have studios and technicians. I mean, imagine that, technicians and you know, go on lots of trips, and that kind of cultural capital then just becomes part of choices because it's something that is bred into a young person as they're growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that access and equality of opportunities is key, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and how we in how we see ourselves and how we tell our stories and how we are, empathy is such an important word, and how we understand difference and how we understand togetherness, and massively important, you know, our cultural identity and our place in the world. So I'm not saying that other subjects don't do this as well. They do, but I've never seen a sensible reason why we're left out.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. There's never been a reason for that. No.
Yeah. So there's something about, you know, when you're talking about representation, you know, when I saw Mira Sayal and goodness gracious me, you know, my heart leapt. It was wonderful. But actually the teacher who taught me at school was a, you know, middle-aged white lady who I think had trained as an art teacher, who sort of had to do it. It didn't mean that I had to be taught by somebody who looked like me, but because she gave me those tools, I could look around, find Cush Jumbo, or we were talking about Ryan Cameron Calais, weren't we? And, so when I went to uni, I did my dissertation on representation of gender and ethnicity or something, and it kind of planted the seeds. And now I think it has to be in the school curriculum for all young people to start buying into it. And then when they become parents, they'll be so much more educated to think, oh, of course you should do music and drama and maths and chemistry and everything. It doesn't mean just because you do maths, you're going to be an accountant, but everyone should know about maths.
Yeah. And I think what you've touched on there a little bit ties to what Theo was saying, that about representation, that what's really interesting, I think, is that you said it didn't matter to you that it was a white older lady who was an arts person. And I wonder if the world has changed so much now that representation is crucial for young people of, global majority upbringing, that having someone around you that is a role model to help you to start navigating your way through your own personal story, which is what we touched on, which Theo started talking about as well. So Theo, what do you think about that in terms of how times have changed and that representation is different now, or isn't it?
Yeah, I think representation is such an interesting thing, and I guess I use my current school for context. I can imagine how it might be or feel to be a young person in my current school, and have an interest in something but not see yourself in that thing. And I think what's really beautiful about the direction we're headed as a global movement, we're headed towards representation being a bit more even, leveling the playing field. And I hope that in years to come, young people in schools across every walk of life can see themselves in the industries they dream to be in. And I think it's about, I think it was Zena that said earlier, creating opportunity. If you don't see something, you might not know it's possible, and just ensuring that level of cultural capital is available for every student.
Yeah, and I think that's hugely important, is that once you see yourself represented somewhere, and I can only speak of this as a woman and not a global majority person, that suddenly that becomes an option for you, that's something that maybe you wouldn't have considered a choice anymore. And I think we could, not going off track, but we can see that in terms of female football, can't we? Girls in football now, whereas
Fabulous.
5 or 6 years ago, girls wouldn't, they wouldn't be seen dead in the kit and getting sweaty, and there was no one to look up to. And then suddenly we win something huge, and women, it is an option now, and a serious option, and it will be taken seriously in sports as well as schools.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. I think there's something, isn't there, that went from, I remember in the kind of out of the anti-racist movements, and there was a kind of multicultural approach which could easily be misunderstood as the mainstream block culture does a little taster session of other cultures that aren't quite as important. It was a bit saris and samosas. Do you remember that? In the 80s and 90s, and you'd have like a diversity day.
Oh gosh.
So I think we've moved away from that, and so I think people like Benjamin Zephaniah, Mira Sayal, who started Talawa Theatre. I've forgotten her name. And Tamasha, and Sita Brahmachari, and all those people, Phoenix Dance.
Yes.
Those people have changed for the better our cultural landscape. But it's about normalizing, and it's about something about genuine inclusion that is properly representative and not just sort of token. Now we're going to have a go at. I don't know. Now we're going to in Ethiopia they do this theatre, and you know, or that. Have you come across Peggy McIntosh?
No.
So Peggy McIntosh is a joy, and talks about not making, you know, thinking about experiences that are that give you opportunity. So are you making the person in your classroom representative? So, you know, sort of Kimberly. So she talked about having a rucksack of privilege, which you don't even know you have until you start unpacking it. She's really worth looking at. So he talks it a privilege checklist. It's a little bit humanities, and it's in the 1980s. So things like, do you imagine that the one different person can speak for all the people of their group? So if you had, I don't know, if you were in an old-fashioned grammar school and there was one scholarship person, would you imagine that scholarship person could speak for the entire working class? Or if you have one Asian child in your class, do you expect her to speak for every single Asian?
Yeah.
You know, from the sort of, whether they were from Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or India, whatever. You know, that's, you know, are you oblivious of the language of any other person? Do you kind of go, if you're looking for the person in charge, do you assume it'll be of a certain gender and a certain race? And she sort of unpacks it in a beautiful way. It's Peggy McIntosh. Everybody should read her.
Okay, that's really interesting.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And Kimberly Crenshaw's work follows straight on from that, about seeing culture as plural and fluid and not a hierarchy, not a monolith. You know, it isn't white culture is normative and other cultures are great to wear a different outfit for a day and bang a funny drum, you know, but actually as important and equal and valid and interconnected, and looking at things critically. It's really important we think about power.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a safe way. I don't mean in a sort of, you know, scary way.
Yeah, no. I get it. And it is that kind of critical thinking aspect of it, isn't it?
So important. And it's so much fun. You know, people like Theatre Centre do it brilliantly. You know, they break down these boundaries and assumptions and stereotypes. And, you know, is it Charlie? I can't remember their name either. Charlie Birds and the Bees performance, or Human Nurture. And it's really accessible, and it's written with lots and lots of research with young people. And, you know, theatre companies like that are fantastic, just fantastic.
It's funny you mention Charlie Josephine's Birds and the Bees.
That's it.
That's actually the set text that I'm using for my GCSE groups.
Oh, brilliant.
And it's just
so
truly
exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah,
it's brilliant. We had them come in and we had them perform a live performance, Theatre Centre, and it was just so surreal. And
what
you
are
know,
they called again, Theo? Say what that is again.
Oh, Birds and the Bees.
Oh, okay, great.
Birds and the Bees by Charlie Josephine, directed by a chap called Rob Watts, I believe.
Yeah, Rob Watts.
And for us, you know, we have like I said, the school is, although hugely populated with Black African, Black Caribbean students, we have huge amount of students that might identify as LGBTQ, or are considering, you know, gender assignment and what that means for them, and you know, their lives. And for us, we could really see that, you know, the light bulb moment for our students, that wow, you know, other people feel the things I do, you know, I'm not alone. Oh, I didn't know that was a thing, and that was achievable
for a job.
For us, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. So we'll carry on talking about representation and what you choose in your curriculum, because you've led nicely into that, Theo, about what you choose in your curriculum to help with that representation. But we'll just take a moment to have a listen to the Teachers Talk Radio News, and actually some of what we've been talking about is echoed really nicely in that. So we'll be back in a sec.
Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and well-being tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC features a story on the lack of guidance for teachers and schools on the issue of how to support transgender pupils. The article on the news website highlights the fact that the government first promised guidance for schools in relation to transgender more than 5 years ago, but the Department for Education is only due to publish this term. The piece has been written by the LGBT correspondent and the LGBT producer, and it outlines the difficulty they have had finding schools who are willing to talk about transgender policies, describing it as almost impossible. They say the BBC contacted head teachers across England, but almost all were too anxious to be interviewed on camera, unwilling to draw attention to their schools or pupils who identify as trans or non-binary. Most head teachers who did respond to questions said that without guidance, schools were left to make their own decisions, with some saying this left them in a no-win situation and fearing that whatever they did, they would be criticised or even vilified. One head teacher did say that the schools wanted guidance and advice to help ensure they were making decisions in the best interests of the child. The article also referenced survey tool Teacher Tap, which had asked almost 7,000 teachers about their experiences of supporting transgender pupils. About 8% of primary school teachers said they taught trans or non-binary pupils, compared to 75% of teachers in secondary. Just over half said they were not very or not at all confident about next steps to take if a child said they wanted to change their name, pronouns, or aspects of their appearance. The guidance is expected to address these issues, as well as the issue of how to involve parents if a child wishes to identify as a gender different to their birth sex, and what to do if a parent disagrees. When BBC News spoke to parents, it was also difficult to find a view everyone agrees with, and parents were also reluctant to speak on record. Some told the BBC they did not want any decisions made without their approval, but others wanted schools to put their child's choices first. It is expected that the Department for Education will publish a draft for consultation prior to final guidance being issued, perhaps highlighting how sensitive the issue is. It is likely the guidance will cover legal obligations for single-sex schools and whether schools should inform parents if their child is questioning their gender. It may offer advice on residential trips and single-sex sports. The DfE has said that the overriding principle would be that the well-being and safeguarding of children was paramount. After last week's online storm over the Key Stage 2 SATS reading paper, the content of the test has finally been published. It has been reported across media outlets that children had been in tears, some staff had to really think about the answers, and parents were annoyed at the stress pupils faced, whilst the DfE said the SATS papers were rigorously trialled. The main concerns were over the test's complexity and length, although this spread into debate about the purpose of SATS overall. Details of the test can be found on the Standards and Testing Agency website. In Wales, a plan for 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050 is said to be likely to fail without a substantial increase in teachers speaking the language. This is according to a Welsh Government report which focuses on the drop in the number of Welsh speakers since the census in 2011. The 2021 census also found a decrease in the number of children and young people able to speak the language. The Welsh Government funds training programmes for those who want to learn or improve their Welsh, who are teachers in schools in Wales. Finally, the BBC covers a story on words and phrases the public would like to see banned. It followed a tweet by Countdown's Susie Dent in which she asked which words people would like to see banished from the dictionary. Top of the list was the phrase going forward, followed by the other phrase no disrespect but, the word like when used as a filler word, and the expression I'm not gonna lie. The list also featured my personal bugbear, sentences that begin with so. Dent used it as an opportunity to explore aspects of the English language and how some phrases which seem modern have actually been around for a long time. Details of the full top 10 are available on the BBC News website. So, going forward, I'm not going to lie, this has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm considering how easy it is to get distracted when researching on the internet. I'm putting myself in the shoes of a young person and have set myself a task of writing a report on the greatest invention of all time. I'm also not going to use ChatGPT. So, my first online search shows a lot of people claim the wheel is the greatest invention, and let's face it, there are a lot of them around. There are 9 million bicycles in Beijing, and that's a fact. That's 18 million wheels just on bikes in one city, if we assume nobody has a tricycle. This led me to want to know how many bicycles there are in the world. The answer I found was an estimated 1 billion. That's 2 billion wheels, again assuming nobody has a tricycle. Now I want to know how many wheels are there in the world. Another search tells me there's an estimated 37 billion, 24 of these billion being toys, and the next biggest share of 8.4 billion being on cars. A quick scan of the results page poses an additional question I hadn't considered. Are there more doors or wheels in the world? Well, I simply have to know. In a few clicks, I find out it's estimated there are 48 billion doors in the world. So based on this research, there are more doors, and isn't a door a great invention? Yet it's not been proposed as one in my prior searches. And if there are that many doors, how many hinges must there be? The amazing thing about the internet is that there's always an answer, and the way search engines deliver those answers are designed to keep you interested and active. So potentially you see more ads and make them more money, which doesn't help get that report written, does it? Does your school teach young people how to research effectively? Do our young people realise how much they are advertised at? I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, want to get in touch at TC Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Okay, so we're back after that tiny break. We were talking about representation and our choices, and Theo, you started touching on some of the content that you're using in your space with your students. Is there anything else that you're consciously choosing, you think, that is more about kind of representation for the young people in your space?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think just for subtext, I've been at my current school for just over a year, and in doing so, I carried all these, so I thought, fabulous schemes of work that I have done before, and swore blind by them, but soon learnt that they weren't as accessible as maybe I thought, because the demographic is different. So I went back to the drawing board and thought about some things that might be a bit more relevant to students, and still, using the works of practitioners like Stanislavski and Brecht in the work we do, but just almost masking it ever so slightly in terms of what I might call it, or the type of activities we might do. So one of the things I look into covering Brecht's work is Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman.
Yeah.
I teach at a year 9, and I also teach that in GCSE, and that is the set text that we use, and that sits alongside Birds of the Bees. So there's that cultural capital there. There's the understanding of the impact of race relations there, the impact of LGBTQ and present there, and I find that it works well in terms of engaging students in the content and in the theorized aspects of drama. Kind of deciphering those maybe really challenging topics that they might have their own personal experiences play into, but then the whole academic thing, taking that into practice and really exploring that in a theorized like nature.
Okay, great. So you're making some real kind of conscious choices with the people that you invite in and the companies that you work with, as well as the text as well, to be able to reflect the young people that you have in your space and the needs that they have to have their voices heard, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just trying to be conscious about, ensuring that what is taught is accessible at some level. I mean, I walked into the current school thinking, I've done a Midsummer's Night's Dream before, and I thought, yeah, that's great, got a great scheme of work on that. And, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. No interest. So I had to go back to the drawing board and think about what would work.
Mm. And obviously we're often talking about 11 to 16 as well, isn't there? So you're actually thinking about the appropriateness of content as well, I suppose. So that also then makes it a little bit more tricky, doesn't it? Because I know when I was teaching in Haringey and Leighton Sixth Form, I had a real diverse group, and I was able to do work by Roy Williams and Bola Agbaje, and so I was able to do that and often hand it over. And I found that the students absolutely engaged with the language, and we'd have a great time in the space, because they would often come up to me and say, "Oh, Wendy, this is how you say that. You're saying it wrong," and I'd be like, "I'm really sorry. I don't know. Go on, teach me." And so we had that relationship where we were able to have those conversations, and I was confident enough to do that. But it was also an appropriate age level with the content, because some of it you do have to be careful with, certainly if you're looking at Key Stage 3, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, and just ensuring that the content is appropriate. And I think Noughts and Crosses offers a really good medium, especially in the last couple of years. The whole sort of George Floyd movement was very much televised, and would have I think resonated with them in some fashion, and they would have their own thoughts about it. I think exploring that and unpacking that in some really kind of insightful discussion, and then taking that to the space and begin to storytell and create and build, I think has been really sort of it's been wonderful to see. It's been wonderful to see, and I think it goes to show that when the content, when the work is appropriate, and when kids feel valued and engaged, there's some really great space to create something quite magical.
Yeah, and I think if you haven't looked yet, do have a look at the Roy Williams radio plays, because I've started doing that with my teacher training group at the moment, and with the Theatre Royal Stratford East, they in response to George Floyd's murder and Black Lives Matter movement, they got together a mass of global majority writers and actors and Black British writers and created radio plays. And they are absolutely amazing. And there are some of them that you could actually do with Key Stage 4. Some of them would be for an older age group, because of the content would be too hard hitting, if you like, for school. But it's definitely something that you should have a look at if you want to think about radio plays.
Absolutely. I've been thinking about exploring radio plays for scheme of work next term, actually. So I actually will take you up on that.
Yeah, do. And Zena, what about you? How have you chosen your curriculum in drama to kind of reflect the diversity in your space?
It's interesting listening to Theo talking about how you have to adapt schemes of work to the children in front of you, and how something in one school doesn't work in another school. It just, it's so much a journey, and it's one that I'm still on, I think. So with a different hat on, and for National Drama, I've led some training on diversity and representation. So with Carolyn Bradley and a lady called Mezaid, and
yes,
as well. So for me, it's about an approach to the work where everyone feels included, and we're not just talking about identity as other, so Black and Asian children have a culture, but when you say to the white children, go, well, I'm just normal, aren't I? It's kind of segregating those views, and having a safe, confident way to talk about difference, to talk about prejudice, to be kind when you call out bigotry, to sort of understand that no cultural group has a monopoly on being ignorant. We can all be racist and sexist. The barristers organisation is investigating our Home Secretary at the moment for treatment for using language that they say is inflammatory. So it's isn't it? and think about culture as fluid and being able to talk about who we are without feeling embarrassed or guilty or undermined or second class. So, so we can use words about majority or bias or privilege or power without feeling uncomfortable. When I taught at Firth Park, which was a school in a more underprivileged area and a very hugely diverse group of students in every possible way, I would talk about characters and say, this character is black or this character is from, and they'd say, Miss, you can't say that. You can't say this character is white. Can't you say this character is white, this character is, or this actor is, or this writer is? Or they would say, well, that's racist. I was like, well, it isn't racist to call me Asian of Sri Lankan background or ethnicity, because that's just, it's only when you start putting a value system on whether, so you have to sort of just look at things with some confidence. And I think that people can get very, very uncomfortable, and it's very easy to not think adequately about how you as a teacher feel comfortable and then how the children will feel comfortable. Because if I'm talking about racism in a majority white school, I don't want all the white children there to feel guilty or like they're not included in this conversation, or I've already made a decision about them, or if I'm talking about sexism, I don't want all the boys to go and stick their heads in a bucket. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's
feel like part of improvement and change and the argument and the conversation. Like we're all involved in prejudice and assumption and class and gender and religion, and it's all pretty juicy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true. We all have our unconscious bias, as many of us will know. We've engaged in training in our workplace about that.
So it's something about taking the heat out of it, normalizing it, educating, discussing. And then with that in mind, in my curriculum or in our curriculum, it's not mine. I've got two fabulous, it's the first time I've really had two full-time drama colleagues who are so on it, like it's amazing. So we've got like a spiral curriculum. We've obviously got Key Stage 4 in mind. For many years, Wendy, I wasn't allowed to teach Year 9s. So that was difficult, obviously, in terms of Key Stage 4. But now we're allowed to teach Year 9. And for the first time now, and I've got two colleagues who are inspirational, so that's amazing. But we've now got 2 Year 10 groups. But, we are allowed to teach Year 9, and it's just wonderful. So we do a range of things, but so we do Midsummer Night's Dream. But we all are, when we're creating our PowerPoints and our slideshows, we try and put new productions on there. So you've got National Theatre View, you've got Peter Brook's one, you've got a Korean company doing Midsummer Night's Dream, you've got... so they can see different interpretations and different representations. There is not, they're not all, they don't all look like they lived 400 years ago with tights and funny stockings.
Yeah.
Does that make, because that's kind of, with ruffs around their necks.
Yeah.
We're not doing that. We're doing promenade theatre and that, that sort of thing. We've got a slide where there's I can't remember the show it was, but one of the flyers was this beautiful sort of forest cartoon and this sort of fairy, but he's wearing a hoodie and he looks a bit cool. And so there's change the way they think about it with your materials. And then when they play, I mean, we don't do the whole play, I only have them for a lesson a week, and I have like 7 lessons or something. So we do like lifts and balances and story theatre, and we kind of have a little bit of a look. We play with gender, and I show them, we do stage combat in Year 8, and like we look at Othello, but we also look at Shakespeare's. There was one at the Globe that was like an all-male Henry V. So we kind of try and bring contemporary theatre with people who are working now you know, not just people who were in their 20s. I mean, like, I love Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead. I absolutely love it, but I don't want to meet all my artists to be of that mold. Does that make sense? I want them to talk about, you know, so we want to take our kids to see Frantic's Metamorphosis, and the adaptation is by Lem Sissy, you know. So that's really exciting, isn't it? Like, what's he going to do?
No,
with
it was by Lem Sissy. Wow, even more reason to see it.
Yeah, so, you know, and then we do Layla's Room, and we do a bit of DNA, and they've just, year 10s have done Refugee Boy. So we try and make sure that we, you know, like, we do a bit of an audit. You know, I would really call on, you know, all our colleagues to grow in confidence, do some training. If talking about race and ethnicity makes you come out in a cold sweat, don't like go, oh, I'm doing it wrong. Just get some training. And, you know, there are practical things, so you just feel more confident. Because, you know, I think I was, you know, when I was taught drama, you have to, that's kind of where we are, isn't it? As English and drama and, you know, teachers, we have to teach empathetically, and we have to jump inside other experiences. So, you know, I played a mum when I did my GCSE, and obviously I hadn't had the experience of having children, not obviously, but thankfully at that stage. You kind of have to do a bit of using your imagination and, you know, thinking about your bias and thinking about what does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you don't, you know, you don't have to be a man to teach King Lear.
No.
And you don't have to be global majority to teach, you know, Stephanie Street's Sisters. You know, we have to teach Roy Williams, and we teach Shakespeare, and we teach, you know, Matt Woodhead, and we teach, you know, as many playwrights as we can get in there, really. And in the limited time we have.
What's interesting that you've started touching on there is that, you know, that idea that you don't have to be of the race or the background as the playwright. So, for example, Roy Williams, and I did do a lot of work, you know, of Roy Williams and Bollock Badge, and I'm clear, you know, I'm a white person, but I was in schools and colleges where it was the majority Black, African, mixed. You know, lots of males too. So they absolutely loved it and kind of lapped it up. But then now I'm training teachers where, you know, predominantly in the room there are white faces, not always, but predominantly. And when we have those kinds of head-on conversations about race, they are incredibly uncomfortable about how to bring these inclusive texts and diverse texts into their new spaces, and don't know how to start. They don't know how to start because they're so nervous about, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I use the wrong phrase? What if I, you know, refer to someone as the wrong race? And I'm like, well, you have a conversation and you apologize. But that's my
that's a bit like, for me, you know, that if you can't make mistakes in a drama studio, what are you doing? You know, and of course there is something about confidence, and there is, you know, we want to be good role models, don't we? But that isn't about leaving texts out because you're not the same. You don't have the experience of the content or the writer or the playwright or the actors. Like, you should be teaching. Who wrote Hang? Debbie Tucker
Green, yeah.
Thank you. Like, or, you know, and also maybe there's something about looking at history, you know, so looking back at Winsome Pinnock and I can't remember what I'm talking about. You know, there was a play, she was 18 or 19 and she did it in a Salford, like she wrote it out of a working class estate in Salford. It's really famous. It's two hands about a mother and a daughter. And the daughter's more grown up than the mother.
No.
And Lorraine, is it Hansbury, Raisins in the Sun?
Right, okay.
So there's something about the history as well. There's, you know, to be able to talk about these texts confidently, like, what is your approach? So are you thinking about the differences between the characters, the playwright, the class in front of you, yourself? Have you sort of thought about potential assumptions? When are you actually looking at the text? Are you thinking about how will I teach this text?
Yeah.
Are we thinking about this text as part of all of our culture? But let's not make mainstream culture invisible or less interesting. Let's talk about this is part of, Debbie Tucker Green is part of, she's one of our most celebrated playwrights.
Yeah, she is.
You can't talk about Shakespeare and not talk about her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if I can teach Shakespeare, who's been dead for a long time now, I'm making up all sorts of assumptions. The poor man's probably turning in his grave, the things I do to his texts.
Theo, do you have any thoughts on that? And if I was, I've got my room full of training teachers who are desperate to do this diverse work, but where do I start? What do I start? They'll say to me, what might your response be to that? I know I realise that's a massive question to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, for me, it's really interesting because I've never really thought about it in great depth, because I guess I just walk with a confidence that I know enough about myself to speak confidently about things that I see. If that makes sense. I don't know if you're following me.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to what Zena said. I think if you're a teacher, a drama teacher, and you're really struggling with these concepts, I think the first place is to go is to just stop and educate yourself. And there's so many good resources on YouTube, about how to kind of approach these things. And I've sent some to a colleague of mine who is a history teacher who was in a similar position, struggling to kind of talk about colonialism in a history context without feeling really uncomfortable, as someone who is white British, teaching that to.
Oh, you've gone a little bit quiet, Theo.
Oh, can you hear me now?
That's perfect. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Perfect. I'll just go back a little bit. I sent some resources over to a white British history teacher who was struggling with teaching or having confidence teaching colonial Britain to a room of largely Black Caribbean, Black African students. And I think just going and educating yourself and leading with the confidence that you're not always going to get everything right, and that's life, and that's okay. But I think if you lead with the intention that you're going to give it a go anyway, and if you offend, hopefully not, but if you do, you're going to apologize and you're going to re-educate yourself. That's all part of life,
Absolutely, and I think that apology is really important, to be like, it's all right to say I'm sorry. As teachers, I don't think we say sorry enough, and I think it's all right to say I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and one of the things that we do is teach about stereotypes, archetypes. They're key in stories, aren't they?
Yeah.
These big characters in Commedia dell'arte, and they're, in Greek myths and legends, archetypes are really important.
Yeah.
So to sort of deconstruct them a little bit. I mean, even year sevens, if you give them the right language and tools, can have a conversation about, why were they all the heroes male if these stories are thousands of years old? So if you were doing it today, how would you interpret that for this generation?
And it's that interrogation and questioning, isn't it?
And you can have real fun with
set
it.
Contexts as well. I'm aware that we have like about a minute and a half left.
Oh, blimey, that's gone quick.
No, time has just flown because there's so much rich stuff to talk about, and I really appreciate the two of you joining this evening and just giving your perspective and sharing your stories with us, because it's really important to hear what you have to say. And that should be, if we're asking those questions and we're having those conversations, that's the place to start. And it always has been for me anyway. And I hope, I probably get it wrong like the next person, but I hope that having conversations like this that are really interesting and rich and important and things that we're thinking about for, the life of the young people in our rooms. This is where we should be starting. Anyway, that's certainly what I think. But I do appreciate both of you joining us this evening and sharing your knowledge, your vast knowledge of your spaces and your young people and how you work with them. So thank you very much, Theo and Zena.
Oh, it's a delight to
having
be
us.
asked, and thank you for having me. And I'm not sure about expertise, but Theo, it's lovely to hear you talk and your passion and enthusiasm. It's absolute joy.
Very kind. And likewise, I've got a couple of questions to ask you after the show, actually. So
Amazing.
thanks for
No
for sharing.
problem.
Sure, we can. But thank you both very much, and go and enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening, and appreciate everything you shared with us this evening.
Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Wendy.
All right, bye, Theo.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening on Teachers Talk Radio. I hope you found that valuable and useful, and it's a way to start some discussions to move forwards with young people in your spaces and hear their voices. So I'm going to say good night and thank you.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.